The Galactic Council chambers fell silent as the emergency transmission crackled through their communication systems. Ambassador Zarkonian of the Velthic Empire stood before the assembled delegates, his usually proud posture now bent with desperation. "Honorable members of the Council," Zarkonian began, his voice trembling, "we come before you not as conquerors or negotiators, but as beings facing extinction." The holographic display showed horrifying images from the Outer Rim worlds. Entire planets stripped of life, their surfaces scarred and blackened. The Zircon swarm had arrived 3 cycles ago, and nothing could stop them. Commander Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force sat in the human delegation section, watching the alien ambassador with growing concern. Beside her, Dr. Jung-Hoon Park studied the tactical data scrolling across his tablet. "The swarm moves like a plague," Zarkonian continued. "They consume everything, organic matter, metals, even the atmosphere itself. 47 worlds have fallen. Our greatest weapons barely slow them down." The Zephyrian delegate, a crystalline being named Zex, spoke with a voice like breaking glass. "What do you expect us to do?" The combined fleet of 3 systems couldn't stop a single hive ship. Sarah leaned forward. The humans had only been part of the Galactic Council for 5 years. They were still considered newcomers, their technology primitive by galactic standards. But she had seen the footage, and something about the Zircon attack patterns seemed familiar. "How fast do they reproduce?" Sarah asked, standing up. The chamber turned to look at her. Many delegates showed surprise that a human would speak during such a critical discussion. Zarkonian pulled up more data. Each adult produces 50 offspring every local day. They mature in hours, not cycles. Double quotes. Dr. Jung-Hoon whispered something to Sarah. She nodded and addressed the chamber again. "Ambassador Zarkonian, have you tried biological warfare?" A ripple of disgust passed through the alien delegates. The Tralaxian ambassador, a slug-like creature, spoke with obvious distaste. "Biological weapons are barbaric. Civilized species do not resort to such methods." "But you're facing extinction," Sarah replied calmly. "Sometimes survival requires difficult choices." The Galactic Council's High Chancellor, a wise old Morphic named Elder Vix, raised a tentacle for silence. "Human representative, are you suggesting your species can help where our combined forces have failed?" Sarah looked around the chamber at the desperate faces of dozens of species. These were advanced civilizations, some thousands of years older than humanity. They had mastered faster than light travel, energy manipulation, and technologies humans could barely understand. Yet they were losing to a swarm of hungry insects. "Earth requests permission to study the Zircon specimens and tactical data," Sarah said. "Give us 1 week." The chamber erupted in skeptical chatter. The Velthic ambassador looked at Sarah with something between hope and disbelief. "1 week?" Zarkonian asked. "Honored human, with respect, 3 more worlds will fall in that time. What can your young species possibly accomplish?" Sarah's expression remained serious. "Ambassador, Earth has experience with swarms. We've fought them before, on our own world. Multiple times." Elder Vix studied the human representative carefully. The Morphic had lived for over 300 years and had developed an ability to read the subtle signs of determination across many species. What he saw in this human's eyes intrigued him. "Very well," Elder Vix announced. "The human delegation will be granted access to all Zircon research and battle data. You have 1 week to present a solution." As the emergency session concluded, delegates filed out with little hope. The Zircon had already proven immune to plasma weapons, neutron bombs, and even antimatter charges. What could a species that had barely left their home system possibly offer? Dr. Jung-Hoon packed up his equipment, shaking his head. "Sarah, I hope you know what you're doing. The entire galaxy is watching us now. Sarah stared at the holographic images of destroyed worlds still floating in the chamber. She thought about Earth's history, about the countless times humanity had faced impossible odds against swarms of enemies. Locusts that darkened skies and devoured crops. Army ants that consumed everything in their path. Even microscopic viruses that had nearly wiped out civilizations. But humans had survived. Not just survived, they had learned to fight back with methods that other species considered unthinkable. Jung-hoon, she said quietly, prepare a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need a consultation with the Department of Biological Warfare and the Ancient Diseases Division. The galaxy had pleaded for salvation. Humanity was about to give them an answer that would change everything. Asterisk. The secure communication channel crackled to life in the depths of Earth's military research complex. General Min-Jung Kim stared at the holographic projection of Commander Sarah Chun, who was currently stationed aboard the Galactic Council's research vessel, Unity's Hope, 300 light-years from Earth. You want us to weaponize what? General Kim asked, his weathered face creasing with concern. Everything we've got, General, Sarah replied. The alien species have never encountered biological warfare. They consider it barbaric, which means the Zircon swarm has no evolutionary defense against Earth-based pathogens. Dr. C.O. Yeon Park, Earth's leading xenobiology expert, stepped into the transmission range. She had been working around the clock since receiving the Zircon specimens. The analysis is complete, Dr. Park announced. The Zircon biology is surprisingly simple. They're essentially organic machines optimized for consumption and reproduction. But that simplicity is also their weakness. She activated her own holographic display, showing the internal structure of a Zircon warrior. The creature looked like a nightmare fusion of insect and machine, with crystalline components integrated into its exoskeleton. Look at their digestive system, Dr. Park continued. They can process almost any organic matter, but they have no immune system as we understand it. Why would they? On their home world, they were the apex predator with no natural enemies. General Kim studied the data. What are you proposing? We start with the classics, Sarah said grimly. Modified versions of diseases that nearly wiped out human civilization. But we engineer them specifically for Zircon biology. The general's expression darkened. Earth's Department of Biological Warfare had been created after the Third World War, when engineered plagues had killed over 2 billion people. The department's mission was supposed to be defensive, developing countermeasures against biological attacks. But they had also maintained samples of history's deadliest pathogens, just in case. Dr. Park pulled up another display. I've identified 17 Earth-based viruses and bacteria that could be modified to target Zircon's cellular structure. The beauty is that we don't need to kill them directly. We just need to disrupt their reproduction cycle. Explain, General Kim ordered. The Zircon reproduce through binary fission, like bacteria, Dr. Park said excitedly. If we can introduce a pathogen that causes genetic errors during reproduction, their offspring will be born defective. Within a few generations, the entire hive becomes non-viable. Meanwhile, aboard the Unity's Hope, Sarah was working with Dr. Jung-hoon to analyze Zircon behavioral patterns. The ship's laboratory had become a hive of activity as human scientists worked alongside bewildered alien researchers. ZEX. The crystalline Zephyrian scientist watched Dr. Jung-hoon prepare a culture sample with obvious disgust. This is madness. You're talking about unleashing diseases across multiple star systems. Would you rather let the Zircon consume every living world in the galaxy? Jung-hoon asked, without looking up from his microscope. The alien scientist's crystalline form flickered with agitation. There must be a more civilized approach. Perhaps we could negotiate with them, or find a way to redirect their expansion. Dr. Jung-hoon finally looked up. Have you tried talking to a virus, X? Have you ever negotiated with a plague of locusts? Before Zex could respond, Sarah's communication device chimed. Ambassador Zarkonian's face appeared in the small hologram, his expression grave. "Commander Chun," the ambassador said urgently, "I bring terrible news. 2 more worlds have fallen, Kepler 442b and the Tralaxian colony of New Sorrow. The swarm is moving faster than our projections indicated." Sarah felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. How long until they reach the core worlds? At their current pace, perhaps 20 standard days, Zarkonian replied. The Galactic Defense Force is preparing for a final stand at the Centauri Gateway, but our strategists give us less than a 30% chance of success. After the transmission ended, Sarah stared out at the stars through the laboratory's viewport. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were being consumed by an unstoppable swarm. The galaxy's most advanced species had tried everything they could think of and failed. But humanity had something the other species lacked: a history of fighting dirty when survival was at stake. "Jung-hoon," she said quietly, "send a priority message to Earth. Tell them to prepare the Pandora Protocols. Asterisk." Dr. Jung-hoon's hands paused over his keyboard. The Pandora Protocols were humanity's most classified biological warfare contingency plans, diseases so devastating that their very existence was known only to a handful of people. "Sarah," he said carefully, "once we open that door, we can't close it again." She turned from the viewport, her expression resolute. "The galaxy asked for salvation. We're going to give it to them." Asterisk deep beneath the Swiss Alps, in a bunker that officially didn't exist, Dr. Elena Vasquez unsealed containers that hadn't been opened in 50 years. The Pandora Vault contained samples of every biological weapon humanity had ever created, plus several that had been too dangerous to ever deploy. "Are you certain about this?" she asked through the secure communication linked to Sarah Chun. Sample P-47 alone could sterilize an entire planet if it mutates beyond our control parameters. Sarah's holographic image flickered in the sterile chamber. "The Zircon have consumed 49 worlds in 8 days. We're past the point of half measures." Above ground, the world continued its normal routine, unaware that humanity was preparing to unleash horrors that had been locked away since the darkest days of Earth's history. In the Galactic Council chambers, delegates from hundreds of species watched helplessly as real-time feeds showed the Zircon swarm approaching the heavily defended Arcturus system. Ambassador Zarkonian stood before the emergency assembly, his proud bearing finally broken. "The Third Fleet has been destroyed." Admiral Kekstar's final transmission reported that their antimatter charges barely slowed the advance. Scouts. Elder Vix, the ancient Morthic Chancellor, raised a trembling tentacle. "What of the human solution?" "It has been 6 days. Commander Chun reports they are in the final testing phase," Zarkonian replied, though his tone suggested little hope. In the research lab aboard Unity's Hope, that testing was proving more challenging than anyone had anticipated. Dr. Jung-hoon stared at the latest results with growing frustration. "The 7th strain failed," he announced to the assembled team. "The Zircon's metabolism is too efficient. They're burning through our modified viruses faster than the pathogens can establish themselves." Zex, the crystalline Zephyrian, made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. "Perhaps this is the universe telling you to abandon this barbaric approach." Sarah ignored the alien scientist and focused on the data streaming across her displays. They had successfully modified 17 different Earth pathogens to target Zircon biology, but the creature's incredible metabolic rate was defeating every attempt at infection. "What about a multi-vector approach?" Dr. Seo-Yeon Park's voice came through the communication link from Earth. "Instead of trying to kill them directly, we target their reproductive cycle, their digestion, and their neural pathways simultaneously." Jung-hoon pulled up the biological models. "It would require perfect timing." We'd need to deploy at least 5 different pathogens in a coordinated strike. And if even one strain fails to take hold, Sarah asked, then we've just taught the Zircon to be immune to biological warfare, Jung-hoon replied grimly. They'll adapt and become even more dangerous. The stakes couldn't be higher. Intelligence reports indicated that the swarm had developed new tactics after each defeat. They were learning, evolving their strategies with terrifying speed. A failed biological attack might give them the evolutionary pressure they needed to become truly unstoppable. Meanwhile, in the Pandora Vault, Dr. Vasquez was preparing humanity's most horrific creation. Sample P-47, codenamed Genesis Eater, had been developed during the resource wars of 2157. It was designed to break down organic matter at the molecular level, turning living tissue into basic nutrients that could be absorbed by modified crops. The weapon had been tested exactly once, on a barren moon in the Tau Ceti system. Within 6 hours, every trace of organic matter on the moon's surface had been dissolved. The scientists who created it had been so horrified by the results that they had immediately sealed the samples and buried all research data. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah's voice crackled through the communicator. I need you to modify P-47 for zircon biology. Can it be done? The elderly scientist stared at the innocent-looking vial in her hands. Theoretically, yes. But Sarah, you don't understand what you're asking. Genesis Eater doesn't just kill. It unmakes things. If it spreads beyond the target zone, Doctor, 49 worlds are gone. In 3 days, the swarm will reach Proxima Centauri, and then Earth is only 2 jumps away. Dr. Vasquez closed her eyes. She had spent her entire career trying to prevent biological warfare, working to develop countermeasures and containment protocols. Now she was being asked to weaponize humanity's darkest creation. But outside the vault, reports were coming in that the Arcturus system's outer planets were under attack. Trillions of sentient beings across the galaxy were facing extinction, and conventional weapons had proven useless. I'll need 12 hours to modify the genetic targeting sequences, Dr. Vasquez said finally. But Sarah, once we deploy this, there's no going back. We'll have crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. Sarah's image nodded solemnly. The galaxy pleaded for salvation, Doctor. This is humanity's answer. In the depths of space, the Zircon swarm continued its inexorable advance, unaware that a species they considered primitive was preparing to unleash weapons that would reshape the very nature of warfare across the cosmos. Asterisk. The modified Genesis Eater was ready. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the Pandora Vault's deployment chamber, watching robotic arms carefully transfer the weaponized pathogen into specialized containment units designed for galactic transport. Each vial contained enough modified P-47 to consume an entire Zircon hive ship, potentially everything else within a 50-kilometer radius if the containment failed. Final systems check complete, she announced through the communication link. Sarah, I need you to understand what you're about to deploy. This isn't just a biological weapon. It's an ecological apocalypse in a bottle. Aboard the Unity's Hope, Sarah Chun stared at the tactical display showing the Zircon advance. The swarm had broken through the Arcturus system's defenses 6 hours ago. 3 billion Zephyrians were dead, their crystalline cities dissolved into raw materials for more Zircon warriors. How long until it reaches the core worlds? She asked. Dr. Jung-hoon consulted his projections. 48 hours until they hit the Centauri gateway. If that falls, Earth is next. The weight of the decision pressed down on Sarah's shoulders. In her hands lay the power to save the galaxy, or potentially destroy it with weapons too dangerous to fully control. That Ambassador Zarkonian's emergency transmission interrupted her thoughts. The Velthek leader appeared haggard, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled from sleepless nights of coordinating the galaxy's defense. Commander Chun, he said urgently. The Galactic Defense Force is requesting immediate deployment of your biological weapons. We cannot hold them any longer. The deployment will require precise coordination, Sarah replied. We need to evacuate all friendly forces from a 50-kilometer radius around each target zone. Zarkonian-S expression shifted to confusion. 50 kilometers? Our energy weapons have blast radiuses measured in meters. Why such a wide evacuation zone? Sarah exchanged glances with Jung-hoon. They hadn't told the alien commanders exactly what they were deploying. The galaxy's species had no concept of weapons that could spread beyond their intended targets, consuming friend and foe alike. Trust us, Sarah said simply. Begin the evacuation immediately. As the Unity's hope moved toward the front lines, Sarah reviewed the deployment protocol one final time. They would target the 3 largest Zircon hive ships with modified Genesis Eater, while simultaneously deploying 7 different viral agents designed to disrupt the swarm's reproductive cycle. It was humanity's first military action as a galactic power, and they were opening with weapons of mass destruction that made antimatter bombs look like firecrackers. Sarah, Jung-hoon said quietly, Zex wants to speak with you privately. The crystalline Zephyrian scientist appeared in the holographic communicator. His form flickering with what Sarah had learned indicated extreme agitation. Commander, Zex began, I have been analyzing your deployment preparations. The safety protocols you are implementing suggest weapons of extraordinary destructive potential. What exactly are you planning to release? Sarah considered her answer carefully. The truth might cause panic among the alien allies, but lies would leave them unprepared for what was coming. Zex, your people have faced the Zircon for 8 days. How many of your worlds are left? The alien scientist's form dimmed. 3, and only because they are heavily fortified core worlds. In 24 hours, Sarah said steadily, either the Zircon will be stopped, or there won't be any worlds left to worry about. We're deploying weapons that Earth swore never to use again. Weapons so dangerous that we buried them and tried to forget they existed. Zex's crystalline structure pulsed with fear. What gives you the right to make this choice for the entire galaxy? The first Genesis Eater deployment hit Hive Ship Alpha at 1427, Galactic Standard Time. From the bridge of the Unity's Hope, Sarah Chun watched through long-range sensors as the massive Zircon vessel, a living mountain of chitin and organic metal spanning 12 kilometers, simply began to dissolve. The process started at the impact point and spread outward like a rapidly expanding cancer, breaking down organic matter at the molecular level. Jesus Christ, Dr. Jung-hoon whispered, his face pale as he monitored the readings. It's working faster than the simulations predicted. The Zircon warriors swarming around the hive ship suddenly convulsed and fell still as the modified viruses took hold. Their reproductive organs liquefied, their neural pathways overloaded, and their digestive systems began consuming their own bodies from within. Ambassador, Zarkonian stood transfixed by the tactical display. In 8 days of warfare, the combined might of the Galactic Defense Force had barely damaged a single hive ship. Now he watched 3 of them dissolve into constituent atoms within minutes. By the 7 suns, he breathed. What manner of weapons are these? Across the battle zone, the secondary viral agents were spreading through the Zircon ranks with terrifying efficiency. Creatures that had seemed unstoppable just hours before were collapsing by the thousands, their bodies racked with engineered plagues that turned their own biology against them. But it was the reaction of the surviving Zircon that truly shocked the galactic observers. For the first time since the invasion began, the swarm retreated. The remaining hive ships powered their organic engines and began fleeing toward the galaxy's edge, abandoning millions of their warrior drones. They're running, Zex announced, his crystalline form brightening with amazement. The Zircon are actually retreating. Sarah felt no triumph, only a cold certainty that they had crossed a line from which there would be no return. Through the communication link, she could hear celebrations breaking out across the Allied fleet, but her attention was fixed on the expanding zones of biological destruction spreading through space. Double quotes, Dr. Vasquez, she called to Earth. Confirm containment status of the Genesis Eater. Deployment. The elderly scientist's voice crackled with barely controlled fear. Sarah, we have a problem. The pathogen is showing signs of mutation. It's adapting to consume non-organic materials. If it continues to evolve at this rate, how long until containment failure? 72 hours. Maybe less. The victory celebrations died as Sarah's announcement spread through the Allied command structure. They had stopped the Zircon, but in doing so, they had potentially unleashed something even more dangerous. What does this mean? Ambassador Zarkonian demanded. Dr. Jung-hoon pulled up the projection models. It means we have 3 days to develop a countermeasure before our own weapons consume everything in a 50 light-year radius. The irony was not lost on anyone. Humanity had saved the galaxy by deploying weapons so dangerous that they now threatened to finish what the Zircon had started. Over the next 72 hours, the greatest scientific minds from across the galaxy worked together in desperate collaboration. Human virologists worked alongside Zephyrian quantum biologists and Velthic genetic engineers, sharing knowledge that had been kept secret for millennia. Dr. Co. Yeon Park emerged from 36 hours of continuous work with a solution that was elegant in its simplicity. We engineer a competing organism, she announced to the exhausted research team. Something designed specifically to consume and neutralize the Genesis Eater before it can spread further. The cure was almost as dangerous as the disease, requiring the release of another engineered organism into the galaxy's ecosystem. But as the deadline approached, it became clear that they had no choice. The neutralizing agent worked. 3 months later, Sarah Chun stood before the full Galactic Council, now meeting on Earth for the first time in the organization's history. The chamber had been modified to accommodate hundreds of different atmospheric requirements, creating a rainbow of environmental zones filled with beings from across known space. The Zircon threat has been eliminated, she announced. Long-range sensors confirm that the remaining hive ships have retreated beyond the galactic rim and show no signs of returning. Elder Vix raised a trembling tentacle. And the cost of this victory? Sarah's expression remained steady. The galaxy now knows that weapons of absolute destruction exist and can be deployed when survival is at stake. The question before this council is whether that knowledge makes us safer or condemns us to a future where such weapons become commonplace. Ambassador Zarkonian spoke for the first time since the crisis ended. Commander Chun, your species has shown us capabilities that we never imagined possible. Some fear what humanity might do with such power. Sarah looked around the vast chamber filled with representatives from civilizations older and more advanced than her own. They had pleaded for salvation, and humanity had answered with weapons that terrified even their creators. The same thing we did this time, she replied. Whatever it takes to survive, the galaxy had been saved. But in the process, it had learned that there were fates worse than conquest, and that humanity was willing to embrace them when, pushed to the edge, the age of innocent warfare was over. The age of total biological warfare had begun, and at the center of it all stood humanity, the species that had answered a plea for salvation by teaching the galaxy how to weaponize extinction itself. Asterisk.